I want to introduce the person who has been my mentor, my guide through this field for the last 5 years. He's been guiding this whole field for over 20 years and is the person who coined the term blended value. It's a real treat to have him here. He's always thinking about the issues that were brought up in this panel and how we really stay rigorous about all of this. Please welcome Jed Emerson.
It's very nice. Thank you. Good morning. So I spent a lot of time working on my comments for today, and they'll be published later today on the SOCAP blog and on the Unreasonable blog. And I tell you that because about a day and a half, 2 days ago, I started realizing that I didn't want to give those comments. But they're really good because they're about like moving from parts to whole in our community and how SOCAP and everything that we're talking about has kind of evolved over the years. And so they're really good. So I hope you take the time to read that. But actually, I want to talk about some of the ideas that were just addressed in this last panel. And I think that at the end of last year, when I left SOCAP, on the one hand, I was really excited. I mean, however you think about mainstreaming, however you think about what it means to go big time, this conversation has totally gone mainstream, and it continues to go big time. And I think we should celebrate that, and it's excellent. We have a lot of new people who are coming into this discussion. A lot of the large institutions are seeing that there are opportunities here, and it's great that our tent is getting bigger and bigger. And having said that, I also am very concerned because I feel like a lot of the discussions that I hear in the field and that I saw at SOCAP last year were all focused on the mechanics of impact investing. They really were targeting the question of how do you create a highly competitive, a perfect fund that'll get you the maximum financial return with great integration of social impact. How do you select the great fund managers? What's the right fee structure that would compensate one adequately for creating this type of vehicle? How do you deploy capital? All of these questions. And these are all critical to our actually doing the work. But my concern is that I feel that in focusing on the how, as I think a number of people have kind of teased out this morning, we're losing our connection with the why, with the fundamentals of what is it we're actually trying to do. And I think that's important because unless we keep grounded in that part of what it is that this discussion and these sets of practices are about, we're going to end up with a very well-developed, really high-functioning marketplace that creates minimal impact. I also get concerned because as we bring more and new people into this conversation, you have folks who are really at different levels of understanding and awareness. And you have people who sincerely believe that this is a new conversation. And these are new ideas. And how do we think about this? How do we define? How do we measure? How do we assess? And the fact of the matter is, this is not a new conversation. This discussion and the sets of practices that we're exploring really, to my mind, are fundamental to the human experience. And if you think about the evolution of capitalism, these issues have been with us from the beginning. In 1604, you had the creation of the Dutch East India Company that basically was the first joint stock ownership company where people came together, bought shares, put in capital in, and financed an expedition. And the idea was that they were going to go out, these captains would go out, they would engage in trade, they would come back and divide the profits with their shareholders. When they came back from that first expedition, the captain reported that when he got to the areas that they had wanted to trade in, the Spanish and the Portuguese already controlled all the good spots. And so they engaged in piracy, and they basically attacked the Spanish and the Portuguese ships and vessels, and they took those items and they brought them back, and they made a lot of money. When they were reporting this out, a Mennonite stood up and said, "This is not what we had agreed was going to happen with this company, and I'm going to sell the shares that I own in this company because they're not in alignment with what it is I thought I was investing in." The very first company in 1604. In 1848, you had the Oneida community in upstate New York that was created and had a going enterprise in silverware and silver service, one of the finest kind of silversmith operations in the country that supported a commune, a utopian community. And right out of the gate in 1848, they were grappling with the same issues and ideas and principles that we're talking about today. This is not new. And as we think about the current challenges and the current state of the field, we need to understand that we actually are part of a historical arc that goes back centuries and will project itself out into the future for more centuries to come. And the way that I think we will understand how to really address the critical challenges of today is by positioning ourselves in that flow of history and in that course of the human experience of exploring what is the meaning and purpose of capital. How do we create community that really generates the full value that we have before us? I also am disturbed because I hear some people who present themselves as impact investors who clearly don't get what this is about. And in particular, there was one gentleman who spoke last year who was representing one of the larger investment banking groups. And he actually said from this stage, the first thing you have to do when you think about impact investing is decide how much financial return you want to surrender in exchange for impact. If that's where you are, that's great. I celebrate the fact that you've joined this community and you're now on this journey. You need to go to the back of the classroom and read some of the stuff that other people have written and some of us have explored, because you don't get what this is about. It is not a conversation about trade-offs and compromise and marginalizing profitability in order to create some sort of fuzzy concept of charitable good, right? It is about how do we create a more integrated approach to value creation through our companies, through our communities, through our capital, and that's the conversation. As somebody who has taught at various places over the years, I know you're not supposed to actually tell somebody that they're wrong. You're supposed to affirm their process and their journey and their inquiry. That is wrong, okay, if you're thinking that way. But I think almost of equal importance is I also hear a lot of conversation about the idea that you can bake in impact into your business model, and therefore, if you've done that, you don't really have to worry about impact because it takes care of itself. And I hear people kind of saying, well, we invest in, electricity in Africa, and so that brings, lighting to these villages that have been off-grid for years, and isn't that wonderful that I didn't even realize I was an impact investor, but we're making a shit ton of cash, and we're doing impact. And I have to say, no, okay? Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a German theologian. Before he went back to Germany, was incarcerated and then ultimately murdered by the Nazis, coined a concept around the cost of discipleship and the idea of cheap grace. And I think we need to understand that it's very easy to look for the lowest common denominator in regards to impact, and to say, how can I just turn this a little bit to make this feel better and to be more, quote, impactful, and then I can sell it as that, and I can sell it to myself as that. I think it's important that we understand that you can't have cheap impact. If you really are going to explore what it means to be an impact investor and to create blended value in the world, you have to kind of fight for it. You have to have intentionality about it. The system that has brought us to this point is a system that does not advance inherently justice and equity and income kind of sharing. I mean, all the things that we're trying to kind of rise up over with regard to traditional capitalism. So you can't just kind of slide in and say, wow, this is we're creating impact. We have to really think about the questions that were raised in the first panel around the purpose of capital. We have to think when we're talking about innovation, disruption, change, who really is kind of paying the price for that disruption and change? Are the people who today are outside of the economic systems that we claim to be concerned about going to still be outside of the new economic systems that we're creating simply because we kind of rearranged the chairs on the deck of the Titanic? So I think really that needs to be an important part of our focus. And George Marshall, who was the originator of the Marshall Plan that helped finance the redevelopment of Europe following World War II, talks about, or at the time when he was selling this idea, talked about the fact that we need to steer our vessels not by the ship to our side, but by the stars above. And I think when we do that, when we really connect with that ultimate purpose and intent of not just what we're trying to do, but what we as a community are trying to do and how our community is connected with the course of human history of people continually trying to rise up and improve their situation, their prospects, the prospects for their families and children. That really is where we're headed and where we want to be. And if you orient toward the stars and your broader goals and vision and passion about what this really is about, you allow yourself to move in to deeper water, to water that can sometimes be challenging, to places where you may actually get wiped out. But ships in port are safe, but that's not what ships are built for. We need to be really focused as we welcome new people into our discussions, as we collaborate, as we create new investment vehicles with this notion of the ultimate intent and purpose of the capital that we seek to deploy. So I hope you keep these ideas in mind, not only what I've just said, but also what the previous speakers and panels have talked about, as you go into the process of this conversation this week and think about how do we as a community best execute on these concepts and ideas and principles? How do we bring these ideas from the vision into the reality and into the communities with the people that we care about? So thank you very much. I hope you have a great SOCAP.